morning, my friends. The paper I will present is entitled Human Sexuality in the Church of the Province of the West Indies, Matthew chapter 23, and the conflict of hidden and public transcripts. Uwai de omen hypocritai. Woe to you, hypocrites. In 1992, James C. Scott published Domination and the Arts of Resistance, Hidden Transcripts. From the perspective of sociology, Scott examined the ideological hegemony by which groups communicated with the public. This he called the public transcript, and is often an attempt in an existing hegemony, to define their social situation. Scott calls this orthopraxy, the social and cultural practices that maintain a particular status quo in the public's eye. Scott distinguishes this from the hidden transcript, which he argues is a social and cultural practice which he argues are social and cultural practices that are contrary to the public image that is being portrayed. Scott applied his theory to the dominant and the dominated in society. The dominated control their rhetoric in the presence of the dominant through gentle and laudable placations, or spoke in such a way to imply that they were not offensive. The code of such communication was understood in group and oftentimes taken as complimentary by the dominant. From an intra-institutional perspective, there is an institutional public transcript as well as an institutional hidden transcript. In chapter 23 of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus addresses the scribes and the Pharisees, showing that their public and hidden transcripts were diametrically opposed. The pericope consists of deprecatory negative assessment of the Pharisees and the scribes by Jesus. The passage has been described as one of the most painful in the New Testament and is generally accepted as the ipsissima verba Jesu, the very words of Jesus. The difference between the Pharisees and Jesus on fundamental issues pertaining to the practice of Judaism most likely was historical, as the scribes and the Pharisees sat on Moses' seat and publicly portrayed themselves as purveyors of the truth. Jesus' harsh criticism of them was to draw attention to the distance between their public transcript and their hidden transcript. This criticism from the historical Jesus continued between the church and synagogue in Matthew's context. Taken out of the historical context, the 7 woes in Matthew chapter 23, in which Jesus describes the scribes and Pharisees as hypocrites and condemns them, are applicable to any human institution, whether religious, political, cultural, or social, where the enemy is the practice of hypocrisy. The present debate on human sexuality and on decriminalization in the church raises the question of the dissonance between the public transcript and the hidden transcript of the church. An appreciation for the depth of this dissonance was experienced in 2012 when, at the Provincial Synod of the Church in the Province of the West Indies, I presented an article entitled The Baptism of the Ethiopian Eunuch, Acts 8:26-40, Gender Ambiguity in Early Christian Antiquity. The then Archbishop of the West Indies, John W.D. Holder, proofread and supported the article, the approach of which was threefold. Firstly, there was a linguistic analysis of the eunuch, eunuchos, in the rhetorical context of the ancient Near East, which was based on the goals of narrative criticism, that is, reading the text against the bias of the traditional exegete, reading against the grain. That approach stripped the doctrinal and dogmatic affirmations of the identity of the eunuch in antiquity with modern-day ecclesiological constructs. Secondly, the article looked at the problem of ethnicity of the eunuch, a Black man, in his social location. Thirdly, the intertextuality of the citation from Isaiah which reversed the Levitical rejection of the eunuch in the temple and now celebrated the eunuch as an integral part of the restored community of Yahweh, was explored. The conclusion: the eunuch was constructed deliberately as a third sexual gender in post-Second Temple Judaism. The good news of Jesus is that this eunuch, a foreigner, an alien, a despised and marginalized character, one who is of despicable color of skin, one who is excluded from the temple and from civil office, one whose gender is neither male nor female, is now totally included in the new eschatological community of the baptized. Naturally, this reading did not go down well with some bishops of the CPWI. The response was ad hominem attacks on the one hand, and failure to critically examine the argument of the article on the other hand. At the same time, a situation was developing in Belize. In an article entitled "West Indian Church Rejects Call to Decriminalize Homosexuality," the Church of England newspaper, published on August 5, 2011, the Anglican Bishop Philip Wright, along with the Roman Catholic Bishop and evangelical churches, rejected the decriminalization of homosexuality. The Anglican Bishop Philip Wright made this announcement at Provincial Synod in rejection of the article that I had presented. The newspaper article concluded, "The laws of Belize reflect God's law," and the churches said, "All changes in the Constitution of Belize that will not promote the sanctity of human sexual relations as established by God should be rejected by the courts." In an asylum research consultancy report dated November 14, 2012, it was stated, announcing that they have also retained a high-powered legal team. The Catholic Bishop Derek Wright, the Anglican Bishop Philip Wright, and the evangelical Reverend Eugene Crawford said, and I quote, "The people of Belize will not surrender our Constitution, our moral foundations, or our way of life to predatory foreign interests." On January the 8th this year, in a landmark case, the Attorney General versus Orozco, and Ars Civil 2019 CA, Civil Appeal number 32 of 2016, an article noted the conclusion of the appellate justices. The Anglican prelate in Belize, Bishop Philip Wright, has submitted evidence that human sexuality is seen as a gift from God to enable human beings to express their affection, love, and companionship for each within marriage. Justice Alwick further noted that as the Anglican and Catholic submissions at first instance had emphasized fundamental human dignity and spoke of pastoral and spiritual support for homosexuals, those views were not therefore compatible with a criminal penalty for purportedly immoral sexual acts. Subsequently, the government of Belize attempted to regularize the situation by tabling the Equal Opportunities Bill 2020. This was quickly withdrawn due to the objection of Bishop Philip Wright and the churches of Belize. Prime Minister Dean Barrow told reporters, "The cabinet felt that this is a good bill. This is a necessary bill. This is an overdue bill." And cabinet was very upset at having to make the decision not to proceed with it. Is there a hidden transcript and a public transcript in what the church is professing in its argument on decriminalization of homosexuality? While I cannot go into precise instances and examples at this time, permit me to raise some questions. Could Bishop Wright and any other bishop of the CPWI, including Barbados, honestly say that they are not aware of any instances of homosexual behavior and relationships in the Anglican Church in the province of the West Indies? Could they honestly say that they have not had to explore allegations of homosexual behavior in the church? And could they say whether, on the basis of that knowledge and knowing it to be a crime, was it reported to the police? If the church is not going to if the church is not going to support the decriminalization of homosexuality, then if they are aware of it, it should be reported as such a crime. Could Bishop Wright and other bishops say that they are aware of firsthand, or have they ever heard of homosexual conditions existing in seminary? In 1995, the Episcopal Church was shocked when the homosexual activity of a Codrington-trained cleric, Lloyd Andrews, was exposed in a Penthouse magazine. Ironically, clergy, inclusive of bishops who were in seminary with Lloyd Andrews, did not express surprise at the emerging events concerning the bishop was known. Homosexuality across the Caribbean, there's no evidence that any of them have them in charge. The time has come for the church to have an urgent internal discussion for the purpose of reconciling its hidden transcript and its public transcript. Failure to do so will incur the harsh judgment of Jesus. Uai de uman, hypocritai, woe to you, hypocrites.
Thank you, Ian, very, very much. It occurred to me that scribe-ism and Phariseeism, Jesus had a word for it, and you've just used it. It may well be a pillar of Caribbean society. I don't know. So thank you for that. And of course, we'll be all ready for the question and answer in a few minutes. Our next panelist is Alexa Hoffman, who is the chair of the United Caribbean Trans Network. So very welcome, Alexa.